Okay, hi. Thanks so much, Rachel, for that tremendously kind introduction, and thank you all so much for inviting us to be part of this exciting JFN conference. I'm Mishy Harman, and I'm the host of Israel's Story. As you'll hear in just a sec, we believe that stories matter. So we'll start off with a very short version of our own story. I came here yesterday from Jerusalem together with my three dear friends and partners on the show, Haya and Shai, who are in the back there, and Maya. There's a whole bunch of us who stayed back in Israel, including that guy, that bearded guy, Yochai, who was one of my oldest friends and one of the original founders of the show. He claimed that he couldn't come. The reason? Tzvi, the baby, he explained, is less than a year old and he's really needed at home. But when I asked Dafna, Yochai's wife, about it, this is what she said.
To be perfectly honest, Yochai is completely unnecessary here. I mean, he's kind of a burden. I mean, I love him, but I don't know how to explain it. It's just like I have more to do when he's actually here.
We were a small group that started this project 3 years ago. We had all grown up together in Noam, the youth group of the conservative movement in Israel. After the army, I came to the States for college, and fast forward many years, just as I was about to return home to begin my PhD, I went on a 13,000-mile-long road trip across America with my dog, Nomi. This is her. Along the way, I must have listened to something like 300 episodes of This American Life, which, in case you don't know, is the leading podcast in the States with more than 5 million listeners per episode. And somewhere outside of Vicksburg, Mississippi, I knew that this was going to be my next big project, an Israeli This American Life. When I got home, I turned to my dear old friends, Ro'i, Yochai, and Shai, and that's how in Shai's living room in Jerusalem, our show was born. There was just one minor problem, which was that none of us knew the first thing about radio. Luckily, we heard that one of the senior producers of This American Life was actually living in Tel Aviv at the time, and she generously met with us and gave us a rundown over falafel of the basics. She then introduced us to her boss, This American Life host, Ira Glass.
Hey, Mishy.
Yeah, hi. So Ira, how did you feel when you heard that there was this Israeli copycat?
I felt fine about it, actually. I felt flattered.
I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we met, I came into your office and I was kind of starstruck and really excited, and I walked into your office, and do you remember what happened?
I totally remember. I said to you, like, oh, are you the Israelis who are ripping off our show? I had heard about you.
And is that how you felt, that we were the Israelis that were ripping off your show?
Well, it isn't a question of how I feel. That's just a statement of fact. You are the Israelis who are ripping off our show.
Now, this might sound a bit like North Korea, I know, but Israel only has 2 national talk radio stations. One belongs to the government, and the other to the army. So when our tiny podcast was picked up by the IDF radio, Galei Tzahal, we couldn't have been more ecstatic. Everything that followed was beyond our wildest dreams. The show became a huge hit, and at the end of our first season in Hebrew, we made a decision that led us onto an entirely new path. We decided to create an English version as well. Now, that wasn't a totally obvious decision. As my college roommate Brandon said when I told him about the idea, okay, so let me get this straight. You're making an American version of the Israeli version of This American Life? So yeah, it sounds kind of complicated. But why did we do it, and why does any of this even matter? Well, on the most basic level, what our show set out to do was change the way that we relate to each other. As anyone who's switched on the radio in Israel knows, what you hear all day long are aggressive interviewers with an open mic yelling at politicians about how they now support bills that just yesterday they had opposed. Here's a little taste of what that sounds like.
לא ענית על שאלה אחת, ינון מגל, תודה רבה לך. כן, לא, אתה.
מה ההבדל בינך לבין היטלר, כלב אדום שכמוך?
אז תלך קיבינימט לארצות הברית, אתה והחברים שלך, פשטינקן דרג גייט קיבינימטי, תעביר אותו מפה, לך לעזאזל.
There's almost no produced radio or storytelling or human interest pieces. And it isn't only an issue of gruff people yelling on air. It's indicative of something much deeper, of the way we live together. Israel, and this is of course nothing new to any of you, is an unbelievably fragmented society. You've got different groups, Arabs and Jews, secular and religious, immigrants and old-timers, settlers, kibbutzniks, diehard liberals, mega hawks. And most people basically self-segregate, limit their interactions with other groups to the bare minimum. But Israel's also a small place, and you can't totally avoid the other. So what happens is you walk down the street, you pass someone, you take a quick look at what they have or don't have on their head, what clothes they're wearing, the color of their skin, and then you immediately label them. We don't stop for a minute to consider them as, well, people with stories. And that's because seeing, in some real way, leads almost automatically to judging. But when you strip the visual, you create space for listening, for actual listening. When we began our show, something magical happened. People began writing in, lots of them. And they told us how Israel's story allowed them to sit in their car or go out for a run and spend a whole hour listening to the stories of people they'd never otherwise meet or speak to. They heard Holocaust survivors who found love after the destruction.
I never had a close relation to a girl.
Yeah, he was so excited. Suddenly, he fell down on the floor.
Look, I was nearly 18, but I have lost my best years in the camps and in the ghetto.
They heard a Palestinian hipster with an obsession for Jordanian royalty who was looking for a hot shidduch in Tulkarem.
My mom's exact words, Queen Rania, yeah, her family's from Tulkarem, where our relatives live. I'll tell you what, in Tulkarem, it's like going to a lemon tree. You could pick all the Queen Ranias you want. You could just pluck them out.
They heard an Eritrean refugee who translated Anne Frank's diary into Tigrinya.
I didn't have many friends, so I had only books that are my friends, and you make the characters in the books your friends.
And they even heard an ex-IDF general who became a buffalo farmer in rural Wisconsin.
My name is Dubi. I live in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Wisconsin, and I'm the first Israeli redneck living in the US.
You see, what we try to do on our show is to take complicated realities, and then instead of simplifying them, we complicate them even more. By giving voice to people we don't usually hear, we ask our audience to step out of their own prejudices and consider life from a different perspective, a more nuanced one. And that also answers my roommate Brandon's question. We began the English show because this need for nuance wasn't only true within Israel. Israel, we felt, was frequently portrayed in the States in one of two pretty unidimensional ways. Either as this place of violence and terror, Bibi, Palestinians, Iranian bombs, Security Council resolutions, delightful things like that. Or on the other hand, you have Israel advocacy groups who go on and on about how Israel invented the cherry tomato, is this Middle Eastern Silicon Valley or startup nation, and just how many Israeli companies there are on the NASDAQ. And somehow neither of these characterizations seem to capture our Israel, this complicated, diverse, and really interesting place that we love. We thought that maybe Israel's story could be a way for Jews and non-Jews around the world to connect to Israel through its people. And to our utter delight, it worked. Now, none of this could have happened without the generous support of and encouragement of our wonderful friends at Tablet Magazine, the Righteous Persons Foundation, the Foes Foundation, the Natan Fund, the Charles H. Revson Foundation, the Dorot Foundation, and the I Center for Israel Education. There's so much more we have planned for the future as we continue to expand and grow our community, and we'd love to tell you all about it over the next few days. So, I've spoken about what we do and why we do it, but now I want to share one story from our show, or at least a very shortened version of one story. Okay, radio voice. The first time I met Haya ben Baruch was in her tiny flat in this huge Soviet-style apartment block in Tzfat, which is an ultra-Orthodox Borough Park meets Berkeley kind of town in the north of Israel. We had talked on the phone a few times, but I really didn't know what to expect. When she opened the door, I walked into a pretty typical Haredi home, super sparse, little kids running around all over the place, a few pictures of rabbis hanging on the walls. But there's actually not a single part of this story, or this family, or Haya, which is typical.
So, Haya, maybe just begin by telling me the story from the start.
Okay, so I grew up in New York. I grew up in Long Island. I was a twin. So my parents were conservadoxim. Now that means that we had milchik dishes and we had meat dishes, and then we also had treif dishes and paper plates for when my mother wanted to eat Chinese food that wasn't kosher. She really, really liked sweet and sour pork.
Despite the occasional Chinese indulgence, Haya's family was actually pretty traditional. But when she graduated from her Jewish day school, Haya kind of rebelled. She didn't do what her mom had hoped or what was expected of a girl with that upbringing. You know, getting married to the Saperstein's lawyer's son, having a bunch of kids, making potato kugel for the kiddush at shul. She knew that just wasn't for her. So instead, she moved as far away as she possibly could, to Alaska, where she got a BA, then a master's, both in marine biology. She stayed there, got married, and had 3 kids.
And unfortunately, then we got divorced. I never expected to get divorced. And then Stan came into my life. I say Mr. Blue Eyes came into my life.
Stan's tall and burly, but so soft-spoken that you have to take a step closer just to hear what he's saying. He had been a professional salmon fisherman, and in all the old photos they showed us, he's hiking in the middle of wild nature, wearing plaid shirts and cut-off jean shorts.
So we started to talk, and then we started to go out, and I knew that I was falling head over heels in love with him. All the years that I'd been with my first husband, something in my heart had closed up, and something was definitely opening up, and I didn't want it to hurt. And I remember I said to him, if this relationship isn't going anywhere permanent, just get out of my life right now, because I didn't want to introduce him to my children, and I didn't want my heart to be broken. And I think we were only just 2 weeks into the relationship.
2 weeks?
2 weeks into the relationship.
So what did he say when you said that to him?
He said he wanted to marry me. That was in June, and in December we got married. He said to me that he wanted 3 children. I said to him, I have 3 children. So he said, yes, I also want 3 children of my own. I'm happy to have your children, but I also want 3 children of my own.
They gave birth to Ari, then to Daniel. Then Haya had 2 miscarriages, and in the beginning of November 1991, when the snow in Alaska was already starting to barricade their door, Haya gave birth to Encore, her 6th child, and 3rd with Stan. It had been a very rough pregnancy.
And the joke was that this kid had given me enough tsaras, enough problems until he was at least 18 years old. But that's not exactly what happened. All of my prayers were for a live baby. I didn't pray for a healthy baby. In Hebrew, we usually say, Bari Shalem, v'chule, v'chule. I didn't pray for that. I just wanted a live baby because I had had these 2 miscarriages, and for me, I lost 2 babies. And when the baby was born, I saw that his ears were kind of folded over.
Haya had heard that that was one of the signs of Down syndrome.
To me, it was a miracle because I just bonded to my baby. I didn't bond to the syndrome, and I think that made all the difference.
When Encore was 5 months old, Haya went to a conference for parents of children with special needs. She heard another mom tell the story of her twins. They both had had cystic fibrosis and died when they were teenagers. But there was one comforting aspect.
The mother said, wow, it was so good that one had the other. They didn't go through the sickness alone.
Most people, I guess, would just be really touched hearing that mom tell her sad story. But Haya, well, isn't most people.
And I went back from this conference and I told Stan, we've got to adopt another baby with Down syndrome so that Encore won't be alone.
As far out as that idea sounds, it actually makes a lot of sense. Haya basically wanted to adopt a little friend for Encore, someone who'd know what he was going through, how he was feeling. They started the process of adoption, meeting with social workers, welfare officers, the whole thing.
And exactly on Encore's first birthday, a family came to us from Anchorage, a mother, a father, a grandmother, a 4-year-old brother, and a 9-day-old baby girl, blue eyes, blonde hair.
With Down syndrome.
With Down syndrome. Mm-hmm.
They adopted her and called her Keren. The two babies were sort of like twins.
And actually, I have some very tsanua, how do you say tsanua pictures? Unmodest pictures that I remember taking that they're actually holding hands while both of them are nursing.
Now, the piece we aired was an hour long. It followed Haya and Stan as they raised their two special needs children. It followed them as their spiritual journey and practical desire to find a supportive community for Keren and Encore led them to Israel, to Tzfat. It followed them as that same journey resulted in Stan converting to Judaism and the entire family becoming more and more religious, trading in their colorful attire for black clothes. It followed Haya as she adopted 3 other babies, all with Down syndrome. For all those twists and turns, and believe me, they're heart-wrenching twists and turns, I hope you tune in to the full episode, which, by the way, was selected as WNYC's Mother's Day special and chosen as one of the 10 best podcast episodes of last year. But, but I want to leave you with one scene, the final scene of our story. The only thing you need to know is that Stan, the former Catholic fisherman, had changed his name to Israel, and Encore, he was now Avichai.
Avichai's bar mitzvah was the same time that was Karen's bat mitzvah, so we took them to a hotel in Yerushalayim, and we thought it was going to be really fancy. And Yisrael and I took the kids to the kotel. Yisrael took Avichai to the men's side, and I took the girls to the women's side, and Avichai came back and he said, I davened that Karen would be my bride. And I thought he was totally pulling my leg. So I looked at Karen, I said, haha, he wants to be your chatan, he wants to be your bridegroom. And she looked at me as if to say, Mom, you just don't get it, do you?
So, some of you might be feeling uncomfortable right about now. So did Haya. I mean, her 2 children, Keren and Avichai, who had grown up together, were falling in love. But just remember, they aren't actually biological siblings. And, well, just take a look at this, 5 years after that day at the Kotel.
Avichai asked Karen, so how was it? And she said, I cried. And he answered her, I also did.
So that, in a nutshell, is Haya's story. And this is just one of hundreds of stories of Israelis of all shapes and colors that we've told on our show. People who have invited us into their homes and into their lives. These stories are all available on our website and even easier on your phone. So thank you all so, so much, and we would absolutely love to invite you to join us on this magical storytelling journey of ours. Thank you.